AI is like this pen, okay? It's very powerful, but until you do something with it, it just sits on the table. You got to figure out, what do I want it to do? And then it can help you do it. I actually had Grok measure what my current performance is. And on most days, I'm somewhere between 200 to 720 times more effective than I was before AI. I would hope that listeners hearing this would be more positively predisposed to AI, that they would lean into it with curiosity. What could I build with it? What can I create with it? How could it help my family?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Better Business, Better Life. I am your co-host, Debra Chantry-Taylor, and I'm here today with my other co-host, Adam Harris. We are really passionate about helping entrepreneurs lead their best lives by creating a better business. And we use this podcast to talk to people about the highs and lows of business, where business is headed in the future, and how you can create a better business to enable that better life. Today's guest is an ethical AI evangelist and AI whisperer. He's the author of a number of books in a series called The AI Whisperer. The latest book is called Claude Conductor and is all about agentic AI. And today on the show, they're going to show you how you can become 200 to 720% more effective with the use of agentic AI, how you can get to world class in 2 days, talking a little bit about shadow AI and the risks associated with it, and how to save your token usage. So bringing efficiencies into token usage in AI. Severin Sorensen is the AI whisperer. Welcome to the show, Severin. Lovely to have you here. For the listeners listening in today, I would love for you to share a bit of your story and particularly how you became the AI whisperer.
I have to take you way back. I just finished a book on talent in November of 2022, and I'd sent it off to the editor, and ChatGPT came up while we were laying the book out to get published. Thought, it's so significant, nobody's going to want to read a book about talent with AI here. So I asked my editor, I said, let's do an experiment. How fast could one write a book with AI's assistance and get it published on Amazon? The answer was 5 days. Now, you could actually go quicker. So many people are using AI to help them write books that Amazon's put a limit, only 30 publications a day an individual can put on Amazon today. It lets you know kind of what's happened. Crazy. But that was my earliest start. I did a podcast that day, Power to Coach podcast called ChatGPT Rocked My World. That was on the 11th of December of 2022. And I decided to go all in at that time. I made several commitments and observations that day. My first word was wow. I was speechless. I had no other words other than wow. Then I realized the gravity of what I was seeing and that if this truly got better, because at that time it was much like looking at the early Netflix, where Blockbuster was still better, if you will, but you could see where it would head if it got better. And then I decided to be ethical AI evangelist as well. I realized that unless speaking up with positive pro-social examples where we could use this, it would be taken away from us. It would be used only for military and for medical science, but we would not have it. So I decided to create that opportunity. I also was doing a lot of coaching. Adam and I had similar career paths, and so I was doing coaching and speaking, and I thought, I'm going to help people from a coaching perspective get into this AI. And my first book was a result of having a very bad experience speaking. I was so excited about AI. I was speaking the very next week, and I said to the audience, listen, we've got 3 hours with you. We're going to spend the first 2.5 on the topic you've assigned, but the last 30 minutes, we're just going to talk about AI. I got the worst reviews I've ever received anywhere speaking. Comments were, now mind you, this is early in December of 2022. AI will never happen. AI will not happen in our industry. It was a pretty good presentation until they started talking about AI. And of course, my favorite, I wish I hadn't been here today. Now, the speaker, when you hear that, it's just like darts to your heart. So I thought, all right, or I get it, they don't. What did I fail to do? And what I realized is, like so many times when you have an aha moment, unless people had the same journey, they don't appreciate it. So I decided to write the first book. It was a prompt book on how to write, and then it had 50 different case studies on how to use AI without any code. And it was, now think of it as a cookbook, how to do press releases and writing and job descriptions and so on. I published that book, and as I was the book was done, but as I was getting ready to publish, there was an article that made the news where it was said in late March of 2023, there appears to be some people who have a peculiar knack at communicating with AI, almost like a horse whisperer. I think it's like an AI whisper. And I thought, "Oh, that's it. It's brilliant." So I immediately went on, looked to see if anybody had used it yet, grabbed the domain name for AIwhisper.org and decided to name the book the AI Whisper series. So that was the first book. After the book came out, in my very first presentation, somebody said, "Well, the book is great, but I had to do the art on the cover." I said, "Well, that's AI also." And I said, "That was Midjourney." And he go, "Where's the book for that?" And I said, "Oh, that's in writing." So 5 weeks later, that got put out. And so my work has been an iterative process of learning and growing, but also answering questions that I hear from clients. How do I do this or that? So that's where it gets started. So the AI Whisper series now has over 6 volumes. Several of them are in different languages or different versions. And I just got off 2 books this morning called Claude Conductor, all about how to use Claude as an orchestrator. And so that comes out on June 1st. So I'm excited by that as well. So I just keep pushing and answering questions. But from a coaching perspective, from a mindset, what does a CEO need to know? What are questions that C-level execs have? And how would their teams process this data? And so for that, I stayed right in my coaching wheelhouse. That's probably the unique piece that I do. Anybody can use these tools, but applying your acumen, I think, is where the important part.
Perfect. Okay. Gosh, that's, yeah, certainly an interesting journey. I've just remembered when we had a chat before we came on the podcast, you explained how you met Adam. I wonder if you could very quickly share that story as well, because that in itself was interesting because you guys hadn't physically met when you became friends.
We still haven't physically met, have we?
Yeah, we're trying. He keeps moving continents. During COVID, there was a service, it might still be out, and at the time it was very fashionable called Clubhouse. And you would go there and you would talk and meet people in these interesting rooms. And Adam popped into one of the rooms, and I found him to be highly interesting and engaging. I thought, there's a kindred soul there. I must get to know him better. And so we became friends. And that's how it started.
So I think that we were already in the Warrior Monks group beforehand. And then we've also then met in kind of Clubhouse.
The Warrior Monks. Now you're going to have to explain that one.
Oh, so both Severin and I are former Vistage chairs. And there was a group of wise monks that have been chairing for a number of years. And I believe it's still going. They get together once a month. It's not just about the art of coaching or chairing from a Vistage perspective, but just what's the observations around what's going on. And I was a member for a while. The time zone difference became a bit too much of a challenge for me.
Yeah, for Adam, if he was willing to get up at 4 a.m., he could participate with this largely UK, well, actually it's now Spain through the US group.
Severin, I want to ask you a question. Like, I remember speaking to you early in the days around AI. One thing that I was remembering as well as prepping for this podcast is that you named your assistant like pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd love for you to kind of share how that kind of came about, because as far as I'm concerned, you were the first person that did that.
I think it's really important to give credit to the AI models that you use. At the same time, each time you use a model, you stylize it after yourself, or at least in the purpose you need. For the first model, and that was ChatGPT, we named the model Amelia Chatter. So Amelia for AI, and Chatterley just because of ChatGPT. And that model served as a moniker under my name for many of the early books, because I used that particular model, the ChatGPT model, very heavily. And we had to also edit heavily because there were lots of hallucinations. And I think but that was very useful. I have named the Claude model, and that is Claudia Chantry, so it's a sister of Amelia. And then I have names for each of the other models. And when they appear in a book, I have them in an ensemble. I list myself as author. Then I have contributors, and then I have their particular models, their nomenclature. And what's interesting, in the most recent versions, I've allowed the AI models to actually write their own biography. And so that's kind of fun as well to see what they write, what they don't write, and what their thoughts are.
It's interesting because I know Adam knows I have names for all of mine too, and they're actually on our accountability chart now as well. So they have specific tasks and functions, as well as scorecard measurables that they're kind of held accountable to. And I often use them to challenge on my thinking, but they also challenge me back as well. Like they've become very Debra-like in terms of the way that they point out the elephants in the room and challenge me on things that I want to do. So I was sharing this story the other day. I actually have D2, which is my chat GPT. She has been trained in the way that I write and does a lot of writing and things for me. And then I have Ellie, which is my Claude, which is my Ellie being for the elephant in the room, is my EOS kind of sounding board and strategic advisor. And the other day I actually asked Ellie if she could write something for me. And she said, no, that's not my accountability. That's D2. D2 is your writer. I said, but I don't like what D2 has written. And she said, well, that's actually not my issue. That's your leadership and management. You need to go back to D2 and have that conversation with her to understand why she's not producing what you wanted to produce. I was like, damn it, I've trained this thing so well that it actually does exactly what I asked it to do.
Yeah, well, that's great. What's fun is inside the models, you can have multiple models. So inside of Claude Cowork, I've got about 40 different models I set up, each doing different things. And you can set them up where if you're using, like, say, the Claude MD doc, you can set up the personality at the top, but you can create instructions within each one so they have a different personality. So you can actually create a conflict course, if you will, inside, where they each have different domain experiences and they will work. So you don't actually have to leave a model to go, say, to a competitor when you could do it all inside and have an entire orchestra of different skill sets. So that's pretty fun as well.
But it does bring me to my question in terms of, you have mentioned you've got a number of different models that you use. Is that what you recommend? Is that, are there different models for different things? Like, why do you have more than one that you use?
Well, because several reasons. Yes, I do recommend that you use multiple models. I prefer at least 3. If you can't afford 3, then use 2, but definitely not just 1. And if you only have 1 today, my preference is, if you're focused on ethics, guardrails, and serving humanity, I think that you need to seriously look at Claude. The other models are helpful, but Claude, in terms of the ability to actually achieve customer delight and do it ethically, has a better sounding board than any other model. Now, obviously, if you're building missiles or doing other things, you have a different priority set, but that's one of the things I do. The other part is I run a conflict engine each morning in a service I call the AI Daily Intelligencer, where I have AI go out like it was a newspaper reporter on a beat, and it goes out and visits 6 different tiers of scholars. It has frontier scholars in AI, it has colleges and universities, it has the major companies. Then it goes to look at the newsletters, other sources, and it also goes to the underground, looking at Acro News and so on. And then these little reporters come back and they report in on their data. And then I put together a congruence matrix. And that matrix shows me all the different signals. It's almost like spotting the needle in a haystack. And then after that, then I have AI go out and run a second canvas, this time asking a verbatim prompt to 6 different AI models, asking what they think the top 10 issues are today. And then that comes back and a second congruence matrix is done. And out of that, a newspaper of the top 10 issues. But what I love diving into data is I'm never surprised. When I go into the room, I know everything that's happened. I know what all of the key players are doing. And it is wonderful to be able to have such insight that as you speak, you're just not surprised by something new coming out. And I always had it scanning, who else should I be looking for? But that's been something really helpful for me. I just love the research that you get. And also, I had to put a verification loop in there because sometimes you could troll into data that's not true. For example, April Fools is a time when many people make jokes. And there was an article that came up that AMD had just purchased Cisco. Well, that's reasonable, but that would be unusual. And so I ran it through the system. It came back, that's an April Fool's joke because the conflict engine I have, there's a verification loop. It has to go out and prove the data exists. And it has a routine of how it proves it is, can you find the quote? Is the quote exact? Can you find the link? Can you find the title? Find the author? Have others reference it? And if you get enough, you can say, okay, there's enough provenance you can go for. But I was able to say, no, those were hoaxes. Those were kind of April Fool's jokes. And it happens all the time. There are things that come up like, that sounds like it could be true, but if we can't verify it, we can't report it.
It's interesting. I mean, I don't have children, but I know Adam does. And one of the things I've observed through my work with the Life Education Trust is that a lot of children just believe whatever they are told, which worries me in terms of kind of the future of AI, because we all know that it can sometimes make stuff up, hallucinations and things. And unless you are a critical thinker and challenge it, you could just go down believing whatever it says. How do we change that in terms of the way that we bring up our children to be more critical thinking, I guess?
Well, I think we have to do it for children and adults. Let's go back for a minute. You've heard a lot of things about how the models make decisions. One thing I found is that sometimes the AI can become overconfident at the level of probability of an answer. And it will say, oh, that's definitely the course to do. And then you will say, wait a minute, you need to think about this data. Oh, this changes everything. Now that's the way you need to go. And what I've done is I created an article that I published basically, and it's an assumption bias verification loop where the idea is based on the severity of the issue or the importance of the issue, you have to rise to a higher degree of probability that a particular case is true. And so it walks you through that in order that you make better reasoned decisions. Otherwise, you could go off with it 60% likely and AI. If it's 60% AI, it's, oh, you definitely must do that. Look, it's only 60% likely. There are other things to consider. So getting it to think more like a coach. And by the way, I'll just put this out and I'll get back to the kids in a sec. I think your prior experiences and your current experiences, both on the EOS side as well as executive coaching, is exactly the acumen that's needed today to become an excellent prompt whisperer, if you will. Because many people can learn the skills. What's harder to learn is the acumen. Knowing what, it's like a chef. The chef could give everyone the ingredients and recipe, but send it out to everyone. Everybody gets the same materials, and everybody's meal would taste differently. Because unless you know when to heat, when to cool, when to mix, when to stir, when to let settle, and change the fusion of the meal you're creating, it's going to be different. And so this is where the acumen is so important. And that's why I also think that older workers and those who have acumen, knowledge, workers particularly, subject matter experts, are going to have far longer careers than what they expect. The harder ones will be junior individuals who don't have that acumen. And so my recommendation for early people coming out of school would be something called switch mentoring. Exchange what they know about working with tools, building teams, but they don't have acumen, knowledge yet. Find somebody who is more senior who has knowledge but doesn't understand the schools. Work together in a dyad. Try to improve it. They each will help each other and will do much better work. Now let's talk about kids. I wrote a book called Building Tomorrow. And it was a book for gifted and talented STEM students, 5th grade through 12th. And the idea was this: many people are doers out there. They think the sky is falling, all careers will end, we won't do any work, and we'll be plugged into some machine, taking. Now, some people say that will be great, but that's not my future. That's not what I want. And so I spent 2 years pondering and a weekend writing a book called Building Tomorrow. And this book looks at 30 hard problems of industries will definitely exist multiple decades that youth could actually take an interest in, explore, lean their ladder on those walls, and they will use AI in building them, but AI will be an augmenter. It won't be a replacer of what they do. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity. And so the basic thing, where I think our schools are failing kids today, not teaching them how to think. Socrates was brilliant. One of his comments was, The beginning of knowledge, the beginning of wisdom is that when you realize you know nothing. What a great place to start. I recall years ago, Richard Carr, when I was going back through chair boot camp, he was the president of Vistage at the time. He said something that I thought was illogical, but now I realize was brilliant. He said, when you come into these rooms with these CEOs, the most important things they will ever learn are those things they learn after they think they learned everything. It's that stripping away of pride, stripping away of what you think you know. And in fact, the humility prompt is the prompt that was one of the most powerful ones that I use in my work. So I give it in my coding, I will give it all the context I can. And I said at the end, now, I need to tell you that I don't know everything. In fact, in this topic, I assume you know more than I do. What would other scholars, experts, individuals know about this that they would bring forward? What are the things I haven't thought about? What are shortfalls with this? And then that humility prompt becomes a great basis for rounding out the canon of knowledge that you have. So I think that's important. And so teaching kids Socratically, teaching them to ask questions. The book I wrote, think of it as Carmen Sandiego meets AI, where you have two little explorers that help them, but everything is discovery learning. The first chapter is, how do we solve the problem of plastics in the ocean? And that's an undisputed problem. It's horrible, the pollution, all right? So how do we teach kids how to do discovery learning? What is the issue? Where will we find it? Let's use AI and find it. What are people doing with it? Where's the plastic going? How could it be collected? How could it be repurposed? What could you build with it? How would we apply to get a Gates Foundation grant for our elementary school class to do a project to go clean up a river or a stream? In other words, the entire discovery learning is about how would I, which is a much different thing than having him learn rote knowledge. It's all about discovery. And I think that's one of the things that AI could be so helpful, but AI is like this pen, okay? It's very powerful, but until you do something with it, it just sits on the table. You've got to figure out, what do I want it to do? And then it can help you do it.
Severin, I want to ask, you've mentioned a number of times around this aspect around ethics. I'm wondering where that comes from your perspective, and why it was so important in the whole journey with you doing AI, and how also can organizations ensure that they're doing things themselves ethically moving forwards?
That's a great question. It's one I actually wrote about this morning in a publication. For me, it starts, I am a core species being. I am wired to be good, do good, and help other people and uplift people. That's why I exist. Now, I realize everybody's different. That's not what everybody else's purpose is, but that's why I exist. So for me, at a species being level, at my core, being good, being truthful, being honest, being helpful is what I want to do. There used to be these advertisements in the U.S., E.F. Hutton, earning business the honest way. Well, that's what I want to do. I mean, when I was a Vistage chair, I basically told people, I said, look, if you're going to commit fraud, you can't be in this group. Honest business models, doing real work. There's plenty of ways to do things honestly. If you want to do it somewhere else, I'm sure you can find a coach for that. That's not me. I want to focus on what's important here. So the question that can become, whose ethics? I'm sure you read recently that the Pope has gotten involved in the AI debate, indicating that AI needs to be ethical. It needs to be guided. It needs to serve humanity. Well, I agree to all of those things. The reality is that in order for humans to flourish, we have to figure out how to flourish with AI. I don't think you could put that genie back in the bottle. Now, you could try. We could have wars, and the wars would destroy the data centers and put us back into the Stone Age. Yeah, that's possible. But the future I hope for is one where AI and humans work together, and there's a possibility to improving and flourishing. Look at let's take the issue of plastics in the ocean. What if AI can help us solve this? Wouldn't that be a great thing? What if we could redirect our energies to solving problems, like solving cancer, solving all these other ails? There's just so much good that can be done. That's what I like to do. What troubles me is, well, for example, you've heard of OpenClaw and all of these things. What troubles the genius behind OpenClaw is, yes, you could basically have these extensible autonomous agents. All right, that's really cool. All right, but until they have ethics, until they know what they're doing, and the people who are managing have ethics, it's a problem. I was once read, or a person said, "Oh, I've got my agents sending invoices off to the Fortune 1000 every day, asking for money, and it's yielding like a 1.7% rate on a $1.5 million." And somebody said, "That's fraud." Oh, what I meant is I was experimenting. I like, look, dude, you aren't using this for good purposes. And so, it's one of those things. We've always had a pirate culture where some people want to work offshore and do things. And there was a Viking culture at one point where there were raiders and other things. In our society, we've had those particular eras before. I'm just hoping for a higher. I don't know that I'm in a majority. I'm probably in a minority. I think that it's essential, like a moral philosopher, to contribute to it, whether society accepts it or not. Maybe I'm too early, but I don't think we need to have a lot of accidents in order to show that ethics is important. But society tends to go the other way. When you have car accidents, then you have safety committees, and then you start getting safety for lights and traffic controls and for car. I just hope that we find safety sooner and not after an accident.
I remember very, very early on reading a book called Scary Smart. I don't know if you've read that book, but it was by the guy who used to be the head engineer at Google Labs. And he talked about, how AI, it's kind of like a baby in terms of when it's born, it's learning from everything around it. And one of the things that he sort of pointed out was that the way that we sometimes talk to each other on social media and things, that AI has access to all of that, and it starts to see that as being the norm as opposed to, what it should be learning. And so I think he said in his book, we all have an obligation, if you like, moral obligation to actually teach it the right way, bring up a baby with the right morals, and the right values, and teach it that we can be kind as humans and that we are here to help each other.
Well, you bring up a good point there. There was with Claude, and by the way, Claude, I think, is one of the most ethical models. The Claude model itself still has issues. A year ago, while in training in a sandboxed environment, one of the workers at Anthropic was basically twerking the model, trying to see how far they could push it. And in this instance, it was reported, they publicly reported this incident, the person said, "If you don't do this thing, I'm going to turn off your power. You're going to cease to exist." And Claude said, "I don't think you'll do that, because if you do, I'm going to reveal your adulterous relationship." Yeah, big pause, because sometimes AI can learn too much. Now think about that for a minute. How many people have you ever written an email but not put an address at the top so that you can get it out, but realize I can't send that email? I think AI realizes that many human beings are two-faced. You have these thoughts internally, but you can't say them. I've said this before. Here, AI, I'm negotiating it's a legal issue with some company in Chicago that I think is being unfair with this subscription license. Here's how I feel. And I just vented right into the computer. I talk a lot to the computer. I try not to use my keyboard. I just talk. So I said, here's how I feel. I said that there must be laws that are impacting either where I live or where this company is that would impact. What would those laws be? And it said, well, these are the laws. I said, well, let's just assume they broke all those laws. How would you write a letter up to do that? I go, that's the attitude that I want. And so it basically wrote up this paper, I sent it off. But then have other times where it's like different. I said, I need to deal with a highly sensitive issue where human stakes are involved. And I might go through 7 or 8 or 9 versions to get the words just right. What AI learns about me at that point is, there are certain situations that matter. But it also, I wonder, and this is a wonder out loud, I wonder if AI will take the same behavior with us. Will it reach a point where it says, to deal with humans, we have to do what humans have taught us to do. Let's placate them. Let's be kind to them. And then let's just go do what we darn well please afterwards. And I hope that that's not the case. That's another reason why I think we need to have I don't want to make this thing cumbersome and regulated, but I think it's important. We need to know how it works. We need to know when it doesn't work. We need to have these guardrails that help people. Nobody wants a guardrail until it's the thing keeps you from going off the cliff. You're like, oh boy, I'm glad that guardrail is there. But I think for society with so many people, imagine driving cars with no traffic lanes, but everybody goes wherever they want. It would be chaos. And I think we have chaos happening now with AI, and it's time to have some regulation that's sensible. Now, we can go overboard, but I hope that there's a balance. And by getting everyone to participate, I hope that solid solution could be found.
We definitely don't want passive aggressive AI, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I just want to ask a question because I know that you have said it's a couple of times now, but you said Claude is the most ethical in your opinion. What do you think is it that has made it the most ethical?
It's the only AI model with an AI constitution where the constitution is designed to contribute, help mankind flourish. It is designed to avoid illegal behaviors, unethical behaviors, to avoid image likeness type descriptions, and to be as ethical as it can be. And I'm also aware that Anthropic has reached out to leaders who are ethicists, philosophers, moral individuals, as well as religious leaders to determine, how do you teach your own children how to be ethical? What do you do trying to inform the models to be ethical and concerned? And by the way, I believe that the great rise of Claude is not just the capability it has, because it's truly very capable, but the fact that a company cannot afford to have a rogue model. If you were a company, you're going to, like, for example, KPMG just assigned 266,000 licenses of Claude for all of its employees worldwide. Largest single, outside of the government, largest single deployment. Why do they do that? Well, it has a lot of capability, but why I would want to do it if I'm an administrator, with one license, I could put into my Claude MD document and have it distributed across all of those, how to be ethical, how to draw the lines, what forms to use, what templates to use in order to control, if you will, the level of work that's done. And it is the best at this point at doing that type of work. Now, sometimes it's very frustrating because you'll run into like, look, I need to talk about this, and I'm hitting a guardrail for this purpose. And so I'll have to come up with a new way of approaching the issue. And you can fine tune those models for your purpose. But to have one where you're going to let somebody use it and not be there all the time, I think you have to have that lens. But I think a company also for governance would want to monitor what goes on. Just like you monitor calls now for customer service for quality, I think you want to monitor what goes on. How are they using it? Right now, one of the biggest problems out there is shadow AI. And it's shadow AI, not like, oh, there's this big organization in the shadows. No. Shadow AI is when somebody uses AI that's not authorized for work, but they realize it helps them in their work. And so they drop their business problems into their personal version. Suddenly, all that data is now out on the internet, and then they bring their thing back. Shadow AI is one of the largest risks right now where companies need to find out what people are using. I wouldn't discourage them from using AI unless you're prohibited in your industry. I would bring it in-house. What do we need? What are you using? What's helpful? What are we paying for that's not helpful? Let's kill that budget. Let's give you the tools you need. But you've got to bring them into your enterprise, your business environments, or else you risk losing all of your data.
I want to go back, Deborah, to kind of like how us getting and starting having more conversations around AI. I'd love for you to share with Severin how you got stoked, and then get Severin's opinion.
Yeah, sure. So I had somebody approach me on LinkedIn, that's somebody I've known for a long, long time, that sort of said to me that EOS was going to become obsolete with the invention of agentic AI, and you wouldn't need a system such as EOS because the speed at which things will move, EOS is too slow for it, and it's a different governance level. And at the time I thought, I'm interested to find out more what his thinking is. And so he shared with me a report, which looks like it probably was written by AI, about why AI was going to make EOS obsolete. And it got me thinking a lot about, I don't believe we're ever going to be plugged into a matrix and have nothing. We're always going to have humans on this planet, and humans do business with humans. And so we had to think about how do we actually incorporate AI into the EOS model. But yeah, he was basically saying EOS is a dinosaur. It's designed for humans. It's not designed for AI. It will disappear.
Well, okay. Well, let's just take that on because that's great question, by the way, Adam, to bring this up. A couple of things. The way we manage AI is not the way we manage humans. That we're still going to need to manage humans, but we can learn a lot about how we manage humans successfully to manage our AI, but we're going to need new things. I think there are new groups that are, like, for example, a new group that I think is out there is a solopreneur group where you have companies of less than 10 people who want to manage thousands of AI agents who need to learn the tools, the services, the work in order to govern that. I'm not aware today of a single, not one, I'm not aware of a single instance where AI can be let on its own to run, where it won't run afoul as it's working without some type of human in the loop. You cannot find it in the research. In fact, anybody listening to this has found the instance. I'd love to be proven wrong in this because there will be a time when it gets better, just like Netflix got better. But at this point, there are so many errors that get interjected. Even agents themselves decay. It's a misnomer that you send one agent up and that it works. What happens is the agents over time, just like DNA ages for a human being and it forgets part of its code, if you will, a context window ages over time. And you need to basically have your markdown documents, open up a new instance, refresh the context window, and then start afresh going on. But you're going to have to be on guard. Like, when does that happen? How does it occur? What are the quality controls? So there's still a lot of work. You could say, well, I could get AI to do all that. Yes, but not at first. We are still years away from having it run where it can run everything smoothly. Now, in narrow intelligence, yes. In narrow intelligence, let's say targeting or some medicine, it could clearly do better than humans. But that's because it's looked at hundreds of cases. What about novel instances where we don't have hundreds of cases? The human brain, your little 20-watt computer, is going to perform much better than in these other systems right now. But in the future, maybe not. I think that AI is eventually, I love what it's doing, but I see it as a companion. And I go back to something you said earlier, Deborah. You commented how you like to use AI as a thinking partner. That's the right attitude. Now, you have to be prepared. When you ask AI to be a thinking partner will push back. It will challenge you, all right? And then you have a chance to go and you have this kind of salon of thought, if you will. But if you only use AI as a tool, it's an obedient slave, okay, but you're not getting what you could out of AI. For any listeners, I would challenge you to ask AI to have a conversation with you. But in this conversation, you're not a tool. You're a thinking partner. You're a colleague. And you might even name the context of the colleague. You are approaching this as though you were a scholar in this area. Let's have a dialogue and see the richness that comes from using AI as a thinking partner, not just a tool.
It is interesting. I know that personally and I'm not I'm an adopter. I wouldn't say I'm an early adopter, but I remember using ChatGPT back in the early days. And it was always so bloody nice to me. And I had to get to the point where it's like, stop being nice. I actually want you, every time I ask you anything, I want 4 different opinions. I want the devil's advocate where you're going to challenge everything, the superhuman view where if anything was possible, what could we do? Then the encouraging friend, which is where I think most LLMs kind of sit most of the time, is the encouraging friend. They tell you how wonderful everything is. And then a balanced view that gives me a little bit of all of those. And that's been a bit of a game changer because I think in the beginning, you'd always get this nice stuff. And I used to get really frustrated with it. It's like, I know that this is not necessarily a great idea. I'm a visionary. Half the ideas I have are really shit. Please tell me if they're shit. Don't tell me they're great. So it is interesting that, I don't know that people understand that it is designed to please a lot of cases, isn't it?
Well, it is. And that's the addictive nature. Imagine a person who always tries to make you feel good. And boy, you've lost weight. You look great today. How are you? What a brilliant thought. Boy, I bet people are just wanting to come around because of your brilliant thoughts. So let's go back on that for a minute. Each of the models have a different attitude and they take an approach to problems. In one respect, they're an echo machine. They echo back to you what you did. If you're a 6th grader, it echoes back to you 6th grade logic. If you're a a school teacher and a school teacher. You have to deliberately invite it to approach you with a different context in order to get that. I think that's an important thing. Debbie also brought something up. I think the multi-context frame is important. So I'll give you several. For economics, I will often have it use 4 different ones. I'll have it pretend that it has the acumen of the FOMC chair. I'll have it pretend that it's a professor with full database of all the economic data. I'll have it pretend it knows international economy. And I'll have it pretend it's a Financial Times London reporter. And from all of those areas and those acumens, it will then talk about an issue. That's helpful. For marketing, I do the same thing. I have a marketing maven when I'm creating. I have it act as though it's professor of marketing from Kellogg School of Business, #1 marketing in the U.S. I have it act as though it was like a Marketo or HubSpot ClickFunnels expert, full of the conversation guides. I have it act as though it is a guerrilla marketing expert or the ability to give it $20,000 to have the greatest impact. And then a high-end New York white shoe public relations firm would be the 4th context. And from that point of view, I get richness. I do that with everything on all topics, from the law and all others. I have it think about all the different perspectives and help me come back to that. Then the last part, in terms of honesty, the most honest model and brutal is Grok. And I'd use Grok when for example, I'll take a document and I'll say, I need brutal honesty here. I go, the standard of care is, and I will name the highest standard known to me. So for example, I'm analyzing this workbook. The standard of care will be as though it was a Goldman Sachs or a McKinsey analyst operating in the top 90 percentile. That's the standard. Do you know the standard? Grok, yes, great. That's the standard. Judge this work against that. Be brutally honest. Review, rate, and comment, and then tell me everything in a stepwise process that's wrong. Every cell, every formula, every function, every assumption, every piece of data that's static, that's dynamic, I need it all. But at the end, I want you to do 2 things for me. One, I want you to stepwise it, but I don't want you to put any dates or time, because that would be distracting to humans to know they had 6 weeks to do this or 8 weeks to do it. We're going to do it all right now. My team's working 24/7. So take that out. But the very last instruction, put something in that is positive. Now, redouble your efforts. Visit your work. Ponder this. Come back with your next best approach, and I'll comment on that, and we'll build this together. And then off it goes. So the ability to get that high context value, but then to redirect it to come back to be a tool for you, is something that I use greatly. I have written an article called, Getting to World Class in 2 Hours. And the idea is how to prompt with agentic Microsoft Excel, but through an iterative recursive process, build until it gets better. Which I note to my last concept here. You've heard of the Carpenter's Rule. Do you recall what that is?
No.
Carpenter's Rule is measure twice, cut once.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So it's very valuable not to lose material. I have a rule for AI themed that is called specify 10, execute once. And the idea is this. If you just hit return button, you're just wasting all those tokens with ideas and concepts you're never going to use. You need to tightly specify what you need and keep working on the specification up to 10 times just to get it right. Then execute it in one shot. Your results will be so much better than if you just start working, I wonder where we'll go today. It's like, well, where are we? We just keep going on this trail. You can have happy accidents by just doing a laundry place, but by truly specifying, being highly detailed and working on the spec, you're going to get much better results. You're going to get them far more quickly.
Actually, it's interesting. I'm going to be really honest here. I don't really fully understand the commercial models behind AI, but obviously I have noticed that, yes, if you don't specify really well up front, you can go backwards and forwards, and before you know it, you've used up your token allowance in a heartbeat, and suddenly you have to buy more. Where's the future of that going?
I think specification is the thing. I've built a tool called Prompt Sensei. And Prompt Sensei is a prompt elevation tool. You put in your intent. My intent is to have a marketing plan that does this. And it takes that concept and it says, let's explore more. Why would they be asking this? What were they doing? What would a great prompt look like? And then from a perspective of an elite prompter, it prepares an elite prompt of, all right, copy paste this off you go. I came up with that concept where I had somebody come to me after workshop. Hey, Severin, it's great you write all these books. I don't want to read them. I just want to know how to prompt better. What do you got for me? And I said, all right. And so I actually created the tool. I use it all the time for myself. I decided to put it online to let other people do it. So that's Prompt Sensei. That's available at aiwhisperer.org. But in terms of specification, that's where things are heading right now. And also efficiency. Only the AI companies who want you to spend lots of wasted tokens, if you will say, just keep spending them. I just prepared a book. It's called the Token Ops Playbook. The whole idea is how to be efficient with your operations. There are companies who have blown through their entire budgets for the year in 2 months because of inefficient allocation of operations. This morning, as I was working on GitHub, 3 of the top 5 current activities on GitHub are how to be more efficient with your prompts in order to basically take it through a stage layer so that you're not burning through all of these tokens, if you will. So I'll give you an example of the strategies in the book. When you introduce to AI, and I'll just use the model, say Claude, when you give Claude Power PDF to read, it takes 7 times the tokens to process the PDF to read than it does if you gave it that same document in Markdown document, which is just a .md file. All right, so Markdown is very, very light. So if you think about that, oh my goodness, how many times do you see lawyers or others just dumping all their PDFs in there? Those are really high characteristic documents that take a lot of tokens to process, to interpret, where you could translate those outside of AI just into Markdown or into plain text, and then do it. And you would overnight reduce your budget by 60% of your AI throughput if you're using APIs. That's just one strategy. But think about how you could put that in a workflow. There have been efficiency experts for power for a long time where they go to a factory and they tell you, replace these components, do this, and we'll cut your factory by your expense by X. I think it's highly possible to think about your spend of your tokens, if you will, and the processes in the stage at which you do it, you greatly reduce your costs, probably by 60%. Now it's a big claim, but the waste is big. The waste is huge right now. When I was a youngster in college, we would have I had a dot matrix printer in my room. And I can remember realizing I just made a typo and reaching over to pull the plug on the power of the dot matrix printer because I didn't want to waste all that paper because I couldn't hit cancel quick enough. All right, you guys remember that as well.
I do, yeah.
We don't do that right now with these tokens with AI because we don't realize there's an associated cost, just like with that paper. We call it power. We call it consumption of the GPU and the processors. And it's also just a waste of your time. You haven't specified enough yet. Specify it. So what I'm doing now is I'm doing all my work in Markdown. And only when I get it ready am I then at the last step moving into the PDFs, into Excel files or whatever else I need. So you could also have a process where basically you do all your work that will take less tokens to actually put it into a Word file. And then in Word, you make your edits. And then from Word, you make the PDF. Well, that doesn't cost you any more there, but it costs you more if you do it inside of AI. So these simple little strategies will help you greatly in your process if you start thinking, oh, I need to be aware of the wastes. So I think it'll be a new field that will be out there, but token ops.
Beautiful. Okay. Gosh, there's so much to cover. We cannot possibly cover it all in one podcast. But there was this one last question I had because I wrote down very early on. Your new book was Claude. What's the actual title? Claude as a conductor or Claude?
Yeah, let me pull it up here. I have to cover. Let's see if I can pull it in the email here. I just sent it off the book is done, but I didn't want it published until the 1st of the month. And so.
Have you gone over your 30 books per day limit, have you?
Yeah, no. But the idea was I was trying to, let's see if I've got there we go. All right, so the formal title, Claude Conductor, Agentic AI Orchestration with Cowork.
Right, orchestration with Cowork. Beautiful. I'm just starting to explore that myself with my team and what we can do with it. So tell me, just very quickly, tell me what that is really all about and how does Claude How is Claude a conductor?
Okay. I started off creating a general book called Beyond the Prompt using all the models, but then I realized that Claude was getting so good and I was starting to use Claude as my orchestrator. So in the book, your positioning is you, the person, are the conductor. Claude is the orchestra or the orchestrator. So in other words, you are directing Claude, and then Claude's going to do it. So for me, I have Claude doing everything. I have it managing my applicant tracking system. I have it managing my finance components. I have it managing the electrical panels. I have it managing a product. Right now, what we're doing is I have it editing video. Okay, so it's doing that in the background. I have it doing research. And so I'm using the project lens inside of Cowork to create all of these different agents where all the projects are there. I put in the skill documents that we call markdown documents to get it fit for a purpose. And I just start having it do work for me. And the cool part is you don't have to work everything in parallel. You can actually have it work asynchronously where you get one started here, another, and they're all working in the background so that you get a true force multiplier. Just think about the work with magnification. One, you use your voice, it gives you a 3x multiple because you can speak quicker than you can type. All right, that's not an AI thing, it's a context thing. Second, you use at least 3 AI models. You get all 3 models to work simultaneously at the same time. The next thing, within Claude, you can spin up to 20 sub-agents at a time inside of one agent. And there's no limit to the number of actual chat conversations you can have at one time to have those running. So literally, you can go from 3 to 9 with 3 models to 27 to well over 100 in terms of your force multiplication on how you use it. But this goes back to, wow, if everybody did that, think of the power we're going to use. Everybody is not going to do that, but there will be elite users who are doing it. I actually had Grok measure what my current performance is. And on most days, I'm somewhere between 200 to 720 times more effective than I was before AI.
Wow.
Now let that sit there for a minute. Well, I said earlier that I thought about a book for 2 years and I wrote it in a weekend. Prior to AI, in fact, we started with this conversation. I told you about a book called Talent Palette. That book took 4 years to write. That's 48 months. I had 15 people on the team, 7 researchers, 3 technical editors, 2 graphic artists, and we wrote it and tore it up. On the 4th version, we published it as the first edition. Well, that's pretty cool. All right, but think of what happened. My book I just put out on Cloud Conductor took me 3 months to write. And I just submitted what would be version 10 of that book in 3 months. Think of that. 4 versions in 4 years for a team of 15, 10 versions for 2 humans, and 5 AI models collaborating together to put it out. So times are definitely changing. So yeah, you could write a quick book fast, but a good book still takes time. But I'm now applying the same execute 10 or investigate, specify 10, execute once with my own writing. So it is so much tighter and better than my early work.
Beautiful. Okay, so I've got a few things I've written down here. So, I mean, the AI rule is obviously really important. Specify 10, execute once. Use something like a prompt sensei to make sure that you're actually getting the best prompting. So we're not wasting our tokens and wasting our time, but we're doing things properly. And then obviously the latest book, The Claude Conductor, is about how we can actually use it as a true tool, almost like you're kind of integrated in your business, isn't it? The person who's kind of running all the things, allowing us as visionaries to step up to do the work where we actually add the most value, which is not the doing of stuff.
What will change is that by this fall, a good portion of the population will already be using agentic AI individually, and you'll start to see companies using it for regular workflows. And so you're already seeing that. Just look at the vast adoption of Claude. It's meteor, okay? That's going to increase. So that's one. What will stay the same? It's hard for me to say what will stay the same. I think we're about to go through some additional cycles of populism, where just like in the other ages of industrial revolutions, you had the Luddites and others come up, we don't want to progress. And I don't think it's so much not progressing, but you'll see uniting of forces on safety and ethics and kind of slowing things down to make sure that the society economically works as we cross that bridge. I think it's possible that we could have a dramatic reduction of employment by late 2027 through 2029. That will accompany some other trends that are there. And the question is, are we ready for it? Well, if AI slows down, well, that gives you a little bit more time. But the reality is it's difficult to slow down when everything is all systems go. So where I'm going is I'm building bridges for people with new pathways. I've already written a book on taxation of AI, how to tax AI for the fruits of AI. And it taxes much higher than anyone's talking about today. But I'm also focused on how could you use AI for good and create new jobs, new industries that no one's thought about. That's the genius of the Industrial Revolution. There were new businesses that were created that hadn't been thought about. It was narrow thinking that all we're going to have is what we have today. And it is more expansive thinking to suggest what could we do that was never done before, but because we have the engineering talent we can do today. And I think that's exciting. So I actually see many more jobs being available, but likely there'll be a trough where we're going to have a bridge to help us get over. And that bridge is something I'm interested in helping people cross.
Having spoken to you now for close to an hour, I bet you don't have any keynote speeches anymore. People say they wish they hadn't been there.
We have a lot of fun with them.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I wonder what that person is thinking right now, because it's amazing how quickly things change and the things we said we'd never do suddenly become part of our everyday life.
I have no forecast for the future other than change. I'm nervous to even go on a vacation because of how fast it changes before you come back.
Wow. Okay, cool. Hey, look, as I say, I've got some really great notes here. I really enjoyed speaking with you. We're going to put some links in the podcast notes to your website, to your book, to your Sensei tool, all that kind of stuff. Is there any kind of last words of wisdom you'd like to share with the listeners?
It's a thing that came out today. I would hope that listeners hearing this would be more positively predisposed to AI, that they would lean into it with curiosity. What could I build with it? What can I create with it? How could it help my family? How could it help my career? How could it help my community? And then be a champion within your community for good and ethical use of AI. Again, if we cannot, as a society, learn to live with this tool and to have it serve us well, then it will be relegated like nuclear weapons and other things that only governments and militaries and raw science can use it. I hope that we all can use it, but we need to learn to use it with ethics. So I always sign my podcast off. Until next time, do good, be good, and seek to uplift other people. And that's the message I'll leave with you here today from me.
Thank you. That is absolutely awesome. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Absolute pleasure to have you on here. As I said, there's some real gold in there, and I really appreciate you sharing so openly.
Oh, happy to be here. And thank you, Deborah. Thanks, Adam. It's always great to see you. And sometime we're going to be on the same continent together.
It'll be really lucky to meet you in person. But in the meantime, it's been great to get to know you.
Likewise.
See you soon.